Yo, what is up guys? It's the Goblin and welcome back to another Fortnite Battle Royale tips and tricks video. In tonight's video, we're going to be talking about 5 tips I'm going to go in depth talking about that will help you get more wins, get more kills, and just improve and get better in general at Fortnite Season 10. Going to talk about all those in tonight's video. If you guys do enjoy the tips and tricks videos, I would very much appreciate if you could drop a like on this thing. Let's go ahead and go for 452 likes. You see it right there up on the screen. It only takes a millisecond or maybe 2 or 3 milliseconds to hit that like button, so I really do appreciate everyone smacking that subscribe if you guys are new, and let's get right into it. So I've written down in my iPhone notes 5 different little tidbits, I guess you could say, or different categories that we're going to talk about on things that I'm going to discuss and things that I think that you should be focusing on that can really elevate your gameplay as far as the current meta, because Fortnite is a game that, I mean, everyone already, you know, we know the goal about it, going for kills versus going for a win. You got to be a good builder, you got to have good aim, we all know that, but the meta is constantly changing and evolving. Even though Fortnite is on the same map, even though it's not, because the map is constantly evolving and changing, this game is always different. Like, you know, Season 10, it's completely different from what we were playing just like a season or 2 ago, and that is because of all the changes they always add, and, you know, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Sometimes there's things we have to deal with, like the mech that we might not want to, but let's go ahead and get right into it. Now, tip number 1 that I wrote down for this season that will help you get more wins is embrace everything. Because there are so many weapons in this game now, particularly with shotguns, with snipers, with just all across the board. There's so many different items, not just particularly weapons in this game. You need to be able to embrace everything and be confident with everything. For example, stuff like, you know, back in the day when it was more limited, you could find your shotgun that you wanted every single time. It's not like that now. You're going to have to know how to use attack. You're going to have to know how to use a double barrel if you're going to tilted town. You're going to have to know about all these things, and it is super duper important to embrace these weapons and to not be scared if you see a drum shotgun. You know, to know, okay, this is what it is. I know how to use this weapon, and I can use it for an early, you know, gunfight or 2, and then upgrade from that. For example, I'm using the heavy sniper a little bit more. Personally, I used the glider redeploy quite a bit, so when that was taken away, a slot was really like revealed for me. So I've been getting a lot better at trying to use the heavy sniper, which isn't just great for its sniping ability. It's great, especially in this meta, at getting into people's builds. Junk rifts, which I think were like disabled for a little bit. I'm not sure what's going on with those, but shock waves, I mean, more important than ever as of right now. Stink bombs, there's so many different, and then just all the shotguns, I would say. Embracing those items and being able to have less missed opportunities where you might see an item but you're not comfortable with it, so you leave it. Like, you know, there's different opportunities like that. For example, right here, just rewatching this gameplay, I see that I could have grabbed that proximity grenade launcher. Now, in the moment, I was just worried about running out of the storm, but stuff like that, you know, that can make the difference, and of course it ends up being fine because I'm able to get some chug splashes here to fill that slot. But making sure all your slots are filled and being, you don't have to be super comfortable. Like, I'm not super comfortable with a lot of weapons, but at least knowing how to use certain weapons, and especially with things that are going to happen a lot, like, you know, different ARs or different shotguns in particular, being confident with those is very, very important. Tip number 2 to talk about is think a step ahead. Now, this has always been important in Fortnite. It's probably one of the most important things ever, and that hasn't changed at all with this current meta. Now, when going into a gunfight or going into a build fight or a battle, you want to have full confidence. I'm not saying not have confidence in your abilities, but you also want to be thinking about the what if. What could go wrong here, and what happens if? First thing you want to think when you're taking a gunfight is the zone. A lot of times people tend to either maybe the zone isn't a problem when they get into the fight, and then it becomes a problem because it's an elongated fight. Think about, what if this guy gets some shots onto me? What if I win this gunfight but I get hurt? You know, you need to be thinking about your materials, the heals that it might take if you take some damage. Also thinking about terrain when making those rotations, thinking about, okay, I know I have to rotate to the zone, but is there a mountain in the way? Is there anything like that? And also, I think another thing that is just super duper important with thinking a step ahead is thinking about, in the area that you're what is the potential for third party? So, you know, if it's a early game fight with 90 people left and it's just me and another guy that landed at Lucky Landing, I don't really have to worry about that. Thinking a step ahead, we're probably, you know, I'm looking around and I'm keeping track of that. But if I'm fighting, you know, there's 10 people left in a small zone, you probably don't want to push another player, because if you get third party, you can't really go, third party. It's kind of like, you know, no crap, you got third partied. The zone was that tight. So while you don't know where the other 100 enemies or 99 enemies are or anything like that, you can know when when you're in a smaller zone or when you're in a hyphy area, or especially when you drop out of the bus and it's like a hot drop. You can know sort of by the bus routes where a lot of players are going to be. So if the bus flies over Pleasant Park right off the start and you drop into Pleasant, you're going to expect that you're going to have 10 or 20, 25 people there. And just thinking a step ahead that you don't only have to take on one engagement, you have to take on a bunch of engagements for the end game is always important. And it's more important than, I wouldn't say more important than ever, but it's always been important in this game. Coming in at tip number 3 is to identify what your enemy has. And this is a more advanced tip that you see good players just do this naturally. They don't even think about it. But I think that a lot of times players, professional players or good players don't talk about this too much because it just seems very obvious, when to a casual player or to, your average player, it might not be so obvious. And that is to identify what your enemy has. Number 1, this can come by identifying the shotgun your enemy has. This can come in a couple of ways. Obviously, you can get hit by it. You can listen for sound effects. You can visually spot the enemy holding that shotgun. Knowing what they have can really help you going into a gunfight. If the enemy has a pump shotgun, you want to be careful pushing that box because they could just edit, boom, one shot you, you're done. If the enemy has a combat shotgun, you want to be careful about, if the enemy has a combat and you have attack, I want to make that fight as close as possible. Having that knowledge and that information, the context and knowledge is power, and knowing that stuff is super duper important, as well as other things like, you need to be more aware than ever now, because something like a junk rift, when that's in the game, just a split second and a small sound it makes, and then it's flying down in your location. Stuff like that you need to know once the enemy drops one junk rift. Of course, be on the weary and on the lookout for other ones like that. Knowing if your enemy has a heavy sniper or just different stuff like that, it can really, really be important in this game. Getting that knowledge and looking, not paying attention to the things that don't matter as much. Oh, what skin is this guy rocking or blah, blah, blah. Pay attention to, okay, this guy seems like he's a good builder, and what sort of weapons, basically lining up your fight and sort of seeing the breakdown of what's going to be happening there. Knowing what your enemy has can give you an advantage because then you know how to play against it. If my enemy has a grenade launcher, I'm going to back up. If my enemy has a combat shotgun, I'm going to try to get closer to them. If my enemy has a drum shotgun, I'm going to run away and try to keep a distance. Those things are important, and you might not think about them, but they do make a difference. Coming in at tip number 4, what I wrote down here is just to do with the mechs. Now, the mechs are something that personally, I don't really like them being in the game, but it looks like, it is what it is, whatever. With the mechs, for personally what I'm doing is I tend to avoid the mechs, and these are some tips for when you're playing as just a normal character and you're running up against mechs. Usually you want to avoid them. It's, sometimes you can get a kill out of them, but usually they'll get damage on you, and it's risky business playing around with those things. So that's at least my strategy with it. Now, what you want to do when a mech does notice you is you want to keep moving. You want to be building and moving away, always moving from one spot to another so he can't hit you with those rockets and the laser beams and stuff like that. And you also want to be creating distance, separating yourself from that clunky mech because of how the movement is. Creating distance, making it hard for that player is definitely what you want to do. Now, if you have to take on a mech, which happens endgame sometimes, small circle and a mech's in there. Usually, if you have a lot of ammo, you want to try to spray down that player, evaluate if the player is in the body of the mech or in the top bubble, and just start spraying, doing as much damage as you can. And usually you want to take it on when it's a situation where you can get some damage in and then back off or move, because you don't want that mech's attention to turn to you. That can cause some trouble. So those are just some tips on how to deal with those. Obviously, they're not nearly as bad now as they were when they first came out. They were just stupid overpowered. And honestly, in solos, they aren't as bad as duos or stuff like that. But that's some tips with that. And coming in at number 5, what I want to talk about is in this season with the mobility items and saving your mobility, and most notably jump pads. Jump pads are more important than ever because of the lack of mobility in this season, the lack of rifts, the lack of, what else is there? The lack of like the air tunnels. There were just so many different things. Bounce pads. There's been so many things that have come and go in the history of Fortnite. But as of right now, movement is kind of low and kind of lacking with your options. So if you have a jump pad, save that thing. It's not necessarily the same as, oh, you get some guy weak, you just want to use that jump pad to push for your mid-game kill. You might need that for a late-game rotation. The thing with the late-game zone is, it's pretty random. So if you get unlucky and the zone's across from you, even if you have mats, you don't want to burn 500, 700 mats trying to move over there. It might take a little bit of damage. Having those jump pads and saving them can be more important than ever. And the same applies for a campfire as well. You usually want to save campfires because of the fact that they don't take up a slot in your inventory. Same sort of thought process could go along with a jump pad. A shockwave grenade is great, but it takes up a slot in your inventory while a jump pad doesn't. It's the same with a med kit versus a campfire, that sort of thought process. So while shockwaves can be great, they probably aren't worth carrying carrying in normals too much unless you're just trying to run around and have fun or whatever, unless you have a lot of them stacked up for late game. Most of the time, you're not going to end up carrying those into the actual end game for rotations. So what it really comes down to is saving those jump pads if you can, and if you can't, being aware, hey, I have no jump pad here, I better have a good amount of materials, and I better be, like I talked about earlier with, I think, tip number 2 or whatever it was, thinking ahead on how I'm going to make this possible rotation. What if the zone, there's a possibility the zone shows it's right on top of me and I just build a 1x1 with metal and get an easy win, but there's a possibility it's over 2 mountains as well, and if you don't have a jump pad, planning ahead for that is a very, very key, because you don't have a glide to redeploy or anything like that in this season right now. Thanks for watching. Drop a like, subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one, and that's about it, and I'm out. Peace.